this computer. And I believe we are recording.
Will you share your screen again, Francis?
Yes, yes. All right, can everybody see that PowerPoint? Super duper. All right, well, thank you all for being here. This is our first ever Zoom community meeting in this time of unprecedented firsts. You know, I miss meeting with all of you in person in the community room, but one of the benefits of this is, as I mentioned, it is recorded. So that way if residents are not able to attend because of childcare or dinner, we are able to then send this out afterwards. Like I said, I cannot see the chat, but Silvina will be monitoring it. If you have questions that arise, you want to kind of keep it fresh in your head for when the Q&A begins, just go ahead and throw it into the chat and we'll answer it once we get to that part of the presentation. So the outline for tonight's meeting is that this is a 20-minute presentation to start. So we're going to begin by explaining our supervision policy, grounding it in some context, what it is, why it is the way it is, how it's enforced, who collaborates with us on this policy. And that part of the meeting is going to be relatively short, only about 20 minutes. For the bulk of the meeting, we really want to spend our time answering questions, talking about resources, and seeing how we can help parents navigate this policy, particularly with all the challenges that have been caused by COVID-19. Yes.
If I may, I think it's a good point. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Silvina Ransford, and I'm the Associate Director for University Housing, and one of my areas of oversight is family housing. I also work with our residence halls and oversee that particular assignment process. So again, welcome you all. I am also on occasion out at family housing to assist Christina with desk coverage as well as Francis. So again, my name is Silvina. It's a pleasure to meet you all and welcome.
Yes, and I apologize, Silvina, for skipping that. So some of the things we will not be able to do tonight is we're not going to be able to discuss any kind of specific incidents that may come up around the topic of supervision. This is out of respect for privacy for students involved. If anybody has an individual incident they want to discuss with Silvina or I, happy to make time at another time this week over the phone or in person, socially distanced in person. You know, we can make that happen, but unfortunately we can't get into those this evening. We also will not be able to talk about altering or reimagining our child supervision policy, because as you're going to hear tonight, this policy is not something we necessarily have direct oversight or control over. But we do want to talk about working within the policy to create opportunities for parents. I expect that some of the conversations we're going to have tonight may not feel great at all times. We want to affirm that anytime we're talking about supervision, it is not coming from a place of judgment. It's coming from a place of genuinely caring about your kids. We are family-oriented people, and we want for everyone to be safe and secure and comfortable. So that's where these policies are rooted in, and that's our focus. So why now? Why are we having this community meeting tonight? So supervision's actually been an ongoing concern for me for the last 5 years, which is as long as I've been here. I arrived here in 2015, and I've personally seen harm come to children who were not supervised by parents or adults. So we believe that supervision is important for that reason, to protect folks, and that's why this discussion is always relevant and important. But in light of COVID-19, we have renewed attention on the issue because we recognize that this pandemic, it's creating impossible situations for parents. But that said, in order to reopen this fall, we need to have everyone following these social distancing guidelines, and that includes our kids. And what we're observing right now is that in the absence of direct adult supervision, some of these kids are not following those guidelines. We also just like to have this meeting in the summertime because we have new residents coming in. So we want to acquaint folks with our policy, because even though it's rooted in our standards and expectations, it's not something that everybody intuitively knows. So now is a good time as folks are moving in to be having this conversation. And one other purpose of this meeting is that as we're meeting, we're seeking to clarify our policies, yes, ground those policies in context, yes, but also we want to de-escalate tension and clarify what our roles are and what our intentions are. We would not be in these roles if we do not care about you and your children. And so we really want to make sure that that is known as we go into this. All right. So to start with, what is our policy? It's pretty plain and simple when you look just at the words of it. This is pulled directly from the FHUA standards and expectations. That's a list of rules and policies that residents agree to when they sign their lease. Children under the age of 12 must be supervised by an adult over the age of 18 at all times when not in their unit. So let's break that down a little bit. What do we mean when we say supervise? So in defining supervision, we borrow language from Oregon's Early Learning Division, and they refer to supervision as awareness of and responsibility for the ongoing activity of each child, which requires physical presence, being near, and having ready access to children in order to intervene if it's needed. Children must be within sight and sound of adults at all times, and adults must be near enough to children to respond when needed. So if a parent says that they're supervising their children, but as often happens, the parent is doing so from inside the apartment, and in some cases from the upper floor, that would not rise to our expectations around supervision, because if they are near enough to know their child is in trouble, but not near enough to necessarily act in time, that's not going to create safety for the child. So that's where we get that word supervision from. But the policy itself comes from Oregon state law. So this is where we pull this from. And you can see here, it says any person with, well, I won't necessarily read it for you, but you can see the policy outlined here. We like to think of Spencerview as a safe place. I think that relative to a lot of other neighborhoods, it is. But we also know that cars drive through Spencerview, sometimes much faster than we would like. People come into our neighborhood to steal. That has happened. We've arrested folks on site with drugs and weapons. And I've even observed situations in which older children themselves were a danger to younger children. So while we do everything in our power to make sure it's safe in FHUA, nothing we come up with is going to totally prevent danger to children. And that's why it's vital in our minds that children are supervised by their adults. So those are our policies. What informs our policy? So besides the Oregon state law, there's a number of other different influences on our policy. Some are internal to the UO, some are external, and that might include the Department of Human Services, sometimes referred to as child welfare. And this also includes the Campus Family Alliance, which is a group made up of the Child Care Center leadership, Non-Trad Student Services, Maria Kallenbach, who some of you may have worked with, the Graduate School, and other offices that serve student parents. And in fact, in the lead up to tonight's meeting, we did consult with those groups just to kind of get their feedback on the presentation and some input from them about how to proceed. Another source that we refer to is General Counsel. So that's the University of Oregon's legal representation, our lawyers on retainer. And every year, they pick apart our standards and expectations and give it the real legal overhaul, which is sometimes maybe a lengthier process than we would like, but a very thorough process, no doubt. It is also vetted by the University Conduct Office, which oversees policy. And family housing sits in this weird space where technically your lease violation is a lease violation, but we process a lease violation to the university conduct system, which is why sometimes those things intertwine. So all that to say, this is not a policy that is come up with arbitrary. It's not created or reviewed in a bubble. It pre-exists me, and it will predate me, I'm sure. Long after I leave, this will likely be the policy. Another thing, a very important thing that informs our policy is our mandatory reporting requirements. So again, a lot of words on the slide. I won't read them out aloud, but the biggest takeaways as you're looking at this slide should be all university staff, which includes our student staff, AKA our community assistants, are considered mandatory reporters. And all children 18 years or younger fall under mandatory reporting laws. What the law considers to be reportable is not concrete, nor do we have a lot of discretion in deciding what is and isn't neglect. That is not really a call that I personally am able to make in a bubble. Unless something is clear-cut neglect or child abuse, my community assistance mandatory reporting requirements is just to let me know, and then I in turn let Sylvina know, and then the people above Sylvina are the ones who make a determination about whether or not we need to call DHS. It is rare that we call DHS, and that is never a decision that we make apropos of nothing. How is our staff trained? So we have these staff members on the front line. How are we trained in recognizing and preventing risk to kids? So speaking for myself, even though I work in student affairs, my background is actually secondary education. So to become a licensed teacher in the state of New York, I was required to take extensive training and coursework that included certification on recognizing and preventing child abuse. Myself and my community assistants every year receive an annual 3-hour training by Becky Lamoureux, who works over in the Moss Street Children's School. And that presentation is called Recognizing and Reporting Child Abuse and Neglect. It is 3 hours long. It is very comprehensive. It is the least pleasant part of training. Outside of that, the CAs receive additional training in how to address instances in which a child is unsupervised. And I'm going to review that protocol on this next slide by talking about how policies are enforced. So to begin with, it is rare that we would address supervision concerns unprompted. I do not typically leave my office and make rounds of the neighborhood looking for trouble. Usually a concern is reported to me by a staff member, by another community member. And if a concern is reported, our staff is going to respond to that issue following the protocol that's outlined in their handbook. The 2 areas that cover this in the handbook are children who are unsupervised, which is on page 14, and then child abuse, which is on page 35. And that's more of a whole appendix of resources that are provided by DHS. I'm going to pull it up now and stop sharing my screen and instead share another screen, just so you can literally see what the CAs have in their handbook. All right, so this is our flow chart. So first and foremost, if we're getting a report that the child is in an unsafe area, for example, kids sometimes like to play in the dumpster area, we'll first remove them from the dangerous situation. From there, we are using some of our training to identify, is there a concern around abuse or neglect? So, you know, if you had a kid out there who is just in a diaper, that would raise some alarm bells. If there's no suspicion of abuse or neglect, sorry, when I say just in a diaper, I'm thinking of a situation where it was 101 degrees and a child was alone, unsupervised, away from home in just a diaper. Is there suspicion of child abuse or neglect? Most of the time, no. Can the child speak? If so, we want to ask that child where they live. And if they don't know where they live, we can look them up in our database just by their last name. If the child doesn't want to tell us where they live, we take some time to explain to the child that we are a staff member, we're here to protect their safety, we want to get them back and connected with mom and dad. At that point, usually a child will tell us where they live, and if it's an older child, 7 to 10, older, we will just sort of visibly watch them go back to their unit if they're close enough to their unit. Younger kids, we've had kids 2 or 3 years old who have been separated from home. We will walk those kids back to their unit. And then we'll have a conversation with the parent about our policy and why the policy is important and why this was a safety concern. If the child can't speak, if the child cannot communicate with our staff members, or if the child cannot tell us where they live, we would then at that point need to involve university police, just because at that point it's an unescorted child. We don't know where they live. We don't even necessarily know that it's one of our residents. That is the rare occasion where we would need to involve university police. Most of the time, if the child can get back to the unit on their own and my staff member can just observe what unit they go into, that's where my staff member's job ends, because I don't want my staff members having conversations with y'all about the policy. I'm the person I want to have those conversations with y'all. So it's very rare that a CA would need to have that conversation, but if the child is not old enough to communicate to us and we need to walk them back, that would be a time where you might work directly with the CA. All right, so we're gonna go back to the PowerPoint. And we are nearing the end of the boring part. Boring but important part. All right, everybody see that? Okay. So what are we observing right now in the community that prompted us to have this meeting? So outside of our reporting requirements, we're also beholden to uphold these policies for our residents, for our fellow staff members, because in the absence of consistent adult supervision, people are being impacted. And some of the things we've seen are children unsupervised, of course, which for the reasons I've described is of concern. Damage to grounds or item left around. So this could include kids pulling down branches, kids going through other residences' gardens, leaving trash and cardboard out, all of which creates additional work for residents, custodial, and grounds staff. We've also gotten disruptions to other community members. So as recently as Monday, I did have a resident email me to say that because of the volume of children at play, they are having a very hard time getting anything done. And at this point, I've been in this job for 5 years. There are requests like that I will smile and nod because kids are going to be kids, and I'm not going to go after every parent for their kids making playful noises. But when kids are screaming at the top of their lungs for an extended period, that's different, and that does have impact on residents. And right now in the summertime, doors and windows are open, so you can understand that that would be a disruptive thing for some residents. Crossing the road unsupervised and not wearing helmets when using scooters and bicycles. So these are two items that genuinely really concern me. We see drivers, many of whom are not our residents, speed through here like it's a racetrack on their way to the 4J schools, using it like a turnaround. And if young children are crossing between neighborhoods unsupervised, that's not safe. And then finally, masks and other social distancing guidelines. So this is the most recent concern. We have kids over the age of 5 who are not wearing masks and they are not social distancing. There is a lot that is unknown about coronavirus, but what we do know is that it is affecting school-aged children. It's dangerous for them, it's dangerous for parents, it's dangerous for our staff members, and we can't expect for children to regulate on their own and to be keeping 6 feet of play when they're in the middle of a make-believe game. That's not a fair expectation of a 6 or 7-year-old. That's why it's important now more than ever that parents are out there with their kids, or that a parent is out there with the children to try and enforce some of these social distancing guidelines which are coming from the state. And so the final slide before we turn this over into a community conversation, where do we go from here? So right now we are clarifying our policy to the community, and that's including how we address these concerns. We are going to send this PowerPoint out to residents and this Zoom meeting out so folks can hear the questions and answers as well. And now we want to take time to discuss opportunities for support, because we know that this is hard, particularly for our student parents. In the longer term, we are working with campus partners to identify more robust resources. I am not a part of any university conversations right now around childcare or education pods, but I can tell you from campus partners I've worked with, those conversations are happening. So I do feel that help is on the way. And as those opportunities become available, if there's opportunities for housing to get in on that, we will, because we want to help parents. And we want to be creative with y'all. If there are ideas you have that fit within this supervision policy, because again, we do not have the power to re-envision this policy dramatically. But if there are cooperative childcare arrangements you all can think of where one parent is taking 2 hours of the day to observe children, that's something that's been recommended by some of the co-op centers. We are into that. We can't necessarily organize it, but we can facilitate it best as we can. So that's enough from me. We are going to turn it over to the community meeting. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen. And I'm going to give my computer a second to readjust as I pull out the dongle. All right.
Francis, I've asked if those here on the Zoom meeting, if they'd like to put their name, then I can call upon them. But I do have one question that has come up, is can we share the training manual? And I will answer to that, no. And the reason why is because staff personal information is noted in there. For example, my information is noted in there as an inclusive part of who to call when they need additional support. So I'd be happy to discuss any of nuances around the training, but unfortunately that training manual also includes private information from our staff, a sanitized version. I will see how I can do that, because for each of the processes we insert ourselves and our number. So for example, in some of the diagrams, my information, my direct line, my cell phone is noted in there as the next person to call. So I'd be happy to review that and see if it's something that we can share out and address any questions that you might have with regards to how we train our staff. But I want to add that.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, if we have all these rules that we're kind of beholden to, it'd be very nice if we could have these, you know, as much of these guidelines accessible as possible to, you know, sort of facilitate an informed discussion instead of kind of a back and forth where you guys have to explain the rule and then we ask questions about the rule. And you know, it would just be very efficient if we had, if we residents who are beholden to this laundry list of rules had those rules available.
What you're trying to get is how will a staff member address a policy follow-up or interaction with staff?
There just seems to be a lot of fuzzy language, both within the law and the policy and the definitions that just see. We can get to all that later, but short answer, yeah, we would being well informed for us residents would be better.
Of course, I'd be happy to follow up with you offline to try to understand your request and see if that's something that others would benefit from. But the process as it stands, I will not share that out.
And just to check in, the standards and expectations, pardon the dogs, the standards and expectations, those are readily available at the housing portal. But the more nuances to how we would enforce those, those would be more conversational, but I'm always available for a conversation, even though now we are all mostly remote.
And I think it's a great opportunity to try to figure out how we can best explain and share how we interact with those policies ourselves as staff and how we would interact with residents. So I really like that idea.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. Sorry, Francis, could you pull up the ORS statute again on the slide, please?
Yeah.
So we can see the language.
100%.
And then Sean, may I go to the next person?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. Marianne, I believe you have a question.
You had mentioned that you were part of the conversations about what to do as far as kind of some solutions to the fact that parents are really stressed about having childcare available. And I'm wondering if you guys are going to try to be part of the solution now that you're aware that it is kind of an issue. One suggestion I have was that there's all these yard duties that are no longer work or recess at schools. And if you were to hire someone that maybe at the main playground area or even at sporadic areas that have children from like 8:30 to 5:30 during the academic school year, to be not necessarily the person that attends to if the child falls, but the person that could direct the child if just to keep basically the riffraff out of the area that are in there that you're concerned about people speeding, people getting trashed out of the dumpsters and the undesirables that you're worried about. Interacting with the children, and then be able to contact the parents who would be at home at the time, just inside their unit studying, that could attend to the children.
Yes, Marianne, your sound was coming on and off, so I certainly want to follow up.
Sure.
But if I understood is, yes, we want to be part of the solution or try to identify opportunities. We understand, and I'm right there with you all. I have a kiddo, and not having school is adding another parallel universe to my world. I'm fortunate that my kid is self-sufficient, and so I understand that. And that's something that we want to explore, is how we as a community, including our residents, can participate in some of these solution-oriented initiatives. I think I mentioned talking about kind of a recreation person who's supervising or creating some of those things. And I know I missed a lot because of the connection, but really want to follow up with you to try to tease out some of those ideas and try to figure out how we can pool our resources, knowing that everybody is stretched very thin and all over the place. But I think, and this is why we wanted to have this, is we believe that amongst all of you and us, we can come up with some amazing ideas. So I do want to connect with you again, Marianne, just to collect some of those ideas, and Francis and I can do that.
Marianne, I think I did hear most of what you said, and I know you were specifically referencing, like using some of these staff who currently don't have work because of the different tolls that COVID has taken. I think that is part of what the university is looking at. Again, I don't want to speak to their plans because I've not been involved in them, and it's not for lack of wanting to. I was not invited. But I do think that is a goal, is that they would have some sort of structure. Whether it is a paid position, I'm uncertain of. I know a lot of departments are really strapped. But yeah, I as soon as I know more about that, I will make that available. And if there's any way that housing can contribute to it, I can't make promises fiscally, but insofar as any other efforts, yes, there's interest in that.
And who would I contact if I share my opinion about that because I know the university got a lot of COVID-19 money, and I think that their goal of the money is to help students continue with their education when they had suffered things like loss of childcare. So who would I direct my concerns with them if you're not the person that's going to be involved in that right now?
So if you're talking about the Dean of Students Emergency Fund,
No, the COVID-19 money that the university got
There's the
to
care.
help students. Yeah, CARES Act.
I would maybe begin with Dean of Students Office. Sylvina, what are your
Okay.
thoughts about that, CARES Act?
Let me look into it to try to figure
Okay.
out where to direct the question, right? I don't want to
Sure.
send it all over the place and then have you be caught in the holding space. I understand that there are a number of child care centers on campus.
They're all closed.
Right, and I know that they're exploring opportunities as well, and so I want to know who they're talking to at the university to share some of those concerns. That way we can tap your energy and recommendations into that as well. So let me get back to you. I have a note here to follow up in regards to
Thank
that.
you.
Mhm.
Let's turn it over to PK. Before we do, I just want to, Sean, I'm going to pull that slide up, but I will also, in addition to sharing out the meeting itself, I will also share out the physical PowerPoint as well. But if anybody wants to jot it down, I'm going to share the screen while PK shares their comment.
Hi, everyone. So I think I am the odd one out here because I don't have a child, but just speaking with a lot of the other graduate students in the apartments, I understand the situation that you're all in. I'm very mindful of the fact that, you know, children are kind of out for the summer and don't have alternative care plans, but the noise has become a real issue. I know for myself and for many other graduate students, we're actively working on research and our studies, and a lot of us have exams that we're preparing for. And, you know, children screaming at the top of their lungs for extended periods of time make that really, really difficult. And I don't know in terms of a solution what I can offer you or how I can help here, except for just kind of reminding all of you to please make sure to, you know, speak with your children and just remind them of the situation that not only they're in, but also we are all in as a community. We don't have anywhere else to go. We don't have any office space right now that we can work in. And we, you know, we all live in this community and we know how thin our walls are and our windows are. So it would just be a big, tremendous help for a lot of us if we can kind of try to lower the volumes a little bit. That would be helpful. Thank you.
We are also working on opportunities by which we can create some safe spaces for folks to study, even those families with children, right? The parent may also need a place to study as well that is available for them. So we're trying to explore what we might have available that we can make it, that we can seek out for those opportunities. So that's something too that we are working with the university. I have a question for, I am so sorry. Menuap?
Yeah, that's me.
Real quick, I just want to interject. Let's make sure we're keeping it civil in the thread. You know, everyone is entitled to have a voice here at the meeting, and as long as we're all being respectful, I don't want this to devolve into a YouTube comment thread.
Thank you. Menuap?
Thank you. I was wondering, what is like the incidence of like child negligence that Francis have presented to us? I mean, what is the number like? Is it really frequent, and which areas? Do you have any specific cases? Really, you just mentioned that you found a few children being, you know, neglected at the dumpster areas, and I want to know: is it really a high number, a particular place? You know, it's as a community, it concerns me, and I see. This discussion is very important. I would say it's too late. It should have been earlier, because in a time like this, Sylvina, you have been mentioning how difficult it is, and it is the right time, but it should have been earlier. So, is there any way I could, you know, you could present us with, you know, the number of incidents or how severe they are? You know, just as a community member, I would like to know that.
Sorry, I had to hit the mute button. I can answer what I can tell you is that I cannot tell you about specific incidents because those are protected under FERPA law because they relate to conduct, privacy, Title IX. I will tell you the really horrible ones that have stuck with me. Fortunately, no more than 1 or 2 a year. But if you're asking in what instances are we seeing children that are being unsupervised, which we are seeing as being a potential risk to that child, it is daily. And I would not say that it's specific to any one neighborhood. It's all over the neighborhood, and the reports come in from different residents and staff members. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't want to imply that we have rampant child abuse and neglect, but it does happen. And for me, even once is more than I ever want to deal with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to add to that, you know, it's we're trying to avoid any incident, and so we're just engaging when we see a situation, and we want to be able to seek support and engage with the parents and anybody that is around to try to provide some guidance. So happy to explore that offline with you anyway. Okay, let's see.
Hi. Hello.
Yes, Asha.
Yeah, I have been thinking when we are having all this discussion. I mean, I really appreciate, you know, going through all the policy. It does bring some clarity. And just with my background, I have been working with children for 20 years, and I have dealt with all sorts of things that you are mentioning: child abuse, neglect, and mandatory reporting. All of that I have done. So I really appreciate that we are trying to, you know, really protect these children who are actually considered as vulnerable citizens. They are still young, they do not have voice. So I want to raise something here, you know, from children's point of view, that when in this situation, I mean, it is really unique situation that we all are into. We all understand that as an adult, what stress level we all are dealing with, whether we are parents, we are not parents, we have study load, workload, all sorts of things. We have so much uncertainty in our lives. All of that, we all can voice that. But I want to mention something, that when we are thinking of resources, some solutions about these children, we really need to think something, that these children, this generation is something experiencing that we did not experience when we were kids. This is something that's been taken as their mental health issues. It's a great threat to their mental health issues, and it's a kind of trauma. And we do not know when all this is going to end, whether it's one term, and how as parents we all are communicating with these children. First we were telling them only about spring term, now we are preparing them for fall term. They have lost their teachers, their friends, all the input, enthusiasm, motivation that they used to get from school. It's a very important factor. And I also know that these younger ones, at least who are below 12 years of age, for them play is the only way that they can maintain their mental health. So whatever policy, anything that wherever we can bend, whatever resources we want to bring together, we really need to think about that these children should not be restricted from playing, something we need to do. And in the whatever hours they get during the day, time is kind of, this is such a special and difficult time that they are running out of the house every now and then. They cannot be kept into these apartments for more than 4 or 5 hours. They like going out. And probably also we need to consider the time factor here. Winter months won't be good for them to go out. This is the only time when they are playing. So probably this is something short term. It could be only fall term. Winter, and maybe in spring they will be going out frequently. But something like it by November, December, I see this pattern changing in them. They would be sitting more inside, higher screen time, all of that, those factors. I just want to raise here that whatever we are thinking, whatever we are communicating as a community, I mean, someone raised about children are screaming. Children are not screaming because they love screaming. Children are screaming because I'm literally noting around my neighborhood how much already it is impacting these children in terms of their mental health issues, because what we are communicating with them, it's hard for them to decipher. And when the children cannot understand something, through behavior they communicate. And screaming is one of the ways they communicate their some kind of pain and disturbance that they are having. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. And it is important, and we are centering that. You know, I I have said a number of times to those who do not work in this field, my family, peers, other places I've worked at, I don't know how you all do it, student parents. I did not have to do it. And I think that it is amazing what you've already pulled off being here under the best of circumstances. And it's amazing what children go through. And this is unfair to everybody to have to go through it. And I do think, yes, there is a huge difference between play noise and also recognizing that some of those play noises are going to escalate because of the emotional and mental pain that children are going through. So I do think that there is a middle ground of being compassionate and being concerned for kids, which I think most of us are, and also trying to do what we can to help our neighbors, some of whom have kids, some of whom do not. But I do appreciate you grounding that perspective. It is important that all of this is rooted in that.
Thank you so much. Just one point that, when we are thinking all of it, somewhere we also need to put something around community awareness that, understanding each other's perspective is the most important thing. We all have to bend certain rules, or we all have to bend ourselves a little bit in this. We can't be very rigid in this because we all are into it. And we all have different sets of, some similar, but some are different problems to deal with here. So kind of a component of community awareness might be useful. I know with resources that you're thinking to put in, like a quiet study place and all of that, library going away. I mean, that is a huge thing that, maybe that has left a lot of students in difficult situation. But along with resources, some kind of community awareness is also important here so that everybody feels into it together.
So two things. One, I do want to honor the fact that Sean had a comment before. He was next in the chat, followed by Joseph, and then Maniwab. Absolutely, we'll come back around to you. Please try to put a pin in the thought. Don't let it get away. I have to say, y'all, there is no us versus them in this conversation. And if I see that kind of dialogue, I will need to start booting folks. I think PK shared a point that is not just PK's perspective. It is a perspective I've gotten numerous emails about. And I am just as beholden to those residents as I am to all of you student parents. So we need to try to reframe the fact that there is a clear conflict of vision, maybe, but certainly we can find compromise. But I do need folks to keep the chat specifically for questions and marking questions. So Sean, then Joseph, then Maniwab.
And then
sorry, go ahead.
Could I make a note on you're saying us versus them? I just want to make one thing clear too. So that family housing, people who live here who have children have no other university housing options, whereas other graduate students who did not have children have other options for housing. So that is just something also to keep in mind when people are saying that, they don't like having their kids here. They knew that there's children here. There are playgrounds. It's a place for children to play. And I understand that the noise level could get high, but if you would like to choose to live in the dorms or live in graduate housing that does not allow kids, that is also an option for you, whereas families have no other option.
I'm going to gently push back and say I do not believe that there is another option. Most graduate students I talk to are not willing to live in the dorms because I think any graduate student would take a rowdy 5-year-old over a rowdy 22-year-old. And then the graduate village is actually a misnomer. It is not just for grad students, and not everybody can afford the parking space that entails. There are other barriers. And again, I care about families. I have one now. And I love that this is a place that prioritizes families. And also, we do have to acknowledge it is family housing and university apartments. That does not mean that people can say no kids at play. That doesn't even mean that we say we won't prioritize families. But it is a place for everybody, and I don't think that it is as simple. But I don't want us necessarily go down that road because I want for us to be spending our time right now talking about this situation, this child supervision situation.
Thanks. Yeah, just to. Sorry, if I have to just put a pin in that, believe me, and I think I speak on behalf of every single student parent when I say it's certainly no easier on us. And I would highly, highly recommend walking a mile or more in our shoes as we try to keep our kids quiet while we study. and navigate all the other things everybody else has to navigate, while we're not absorbing as much information, while we have to take care of our kids, while we now have letters being pinned to our door about what else we need to be doing as parents. And thank you, Asha, so much for opening the door for the real discussion, which is like how this is impacting all of us emotionally beyond the policy, right? Bringing a human face to it. And I think that's extremely important, because this is impacting all of us. It's stressful for everyone. And it's especially difficult in a time right now when we don't know what, if any, help we're going to have in the fall, except to just lean on other overworked students who are also parents, who are also trying to fit their lives and their studies in between, not only bettering their future, but also, you know, for their kids and future generations as well in society at large. And so I think, like, the biggest elephant in the room here seems to be the fact that, like, it's all about how policy is implemented, right? We have this law with very hazy language, and it sounds like even when the state gets involved, even when child services, you know, the state agents get involved in this thing, who are there to carry out the law, and they're even more trained than our CAs are. It seems like even there's not even any clear-cut lines in what they do either. So it's hard to even decipher how we would pin down anything in regards to policy, which, you're right, Francis. You know, I and a few of us here spend a good portion of our life as bureaucrats. We know that policy isn't easy to change, and it largely just stays in stone because the people setting it are probably not in a position to really care about concerns that are 15 years behind them in their career. So what it comes down to is how we're interacting as a community, both with amongst ourselves and between university staff and university management, because you know, you two, Francis and Sylvina, are here to, you know, make sure these facilities don't burn down and nothing too terribly tragic happens in your charge. But, you know, life doesn't fit neatly within Excel spreadsheet lines and policy guidance. And I think there's got to be a better solution here. And I think that for most of us, at least for our community in our courtyard, we know each other, we know our kids well enough, and damn it, if I don't think there's a problem with parents always being within arm's reach of their kids. You know, I watch my kids climb some things sometimes, and it makes me nervous. And sometimes I just have to trust in my kids and that I know. And if I see something really messed up, of course I'll intervene, because nobody cares more about our kids than we do, right? So our kids watch out for each other. We watch out for other people's kids in this neighborhood. And we need to be having those kind of conversations, except saying, well, parents, you know, the university so-and-sos think that y'all should be out there 8 hours a day, at least, sitting on this bench. Well, you know what we're not doing while we're sitting out there on the bench? We're not doing our homework. We're not doing the work that we need to do maybe to pay our bills. We're not cooking. We're not cleaning. We're not doing all the other parent duties. We're not tending and giving attention and, you know, and answering questions. Well, I mean, we would be if we're out there with our kids, I suppose, but there's cycles throughout the day of that, right? And I look out in the yard and I think, God, I don't want to move from here, because my kids have the best community of kids they could possibly have around them, multiple ages, and they look out for each other. And that's exactly why they didn't really talk to you when you approached them about cleaning up trash in the courtyard the other morning, is because they know better, Francis. Our kids know better. And we parent, and we do things behind the scenes that y'all don't see 8 to 5 when you're here and you step outside the office and then you go home in the afternoon. And so, like, that's the bigger conversation we need to be having, is how we're implementing this policy on behalf of parents. You know, we have the policy as it is so that we have a toolkit to prosecute if something really messed up happens. But you know what? Those things are really impossible to prevent. And so what we should really be talking about is not, okay, cool, the policy says this, but how are we going to interpret that so that we can maintain a cohesive community here in a safe place, a truly safe place for our kids and parents and all of us students to learn, when we're giving the university so much of our time and money and resources and effort to be here. And I think that that's really at the heart of the issue, is how we're interpreting this and implementing this as a community, not necessarily what's on the PowerPoint slide.
Thank you, Sean. And I think that's where we wanted the conversation to be about, is how can we understand? Because we have this enforcement, right? We are not in your households. We are not seeing all the work behind the scenes that is going on to help us navigate through these things, right? We come in at odd times, and so we're seeing a slide of what is happening. And so we would love to understand how to be part of that. And so hoping to be able to engage with that. So very much interested in that. And I'd like to pursue this further with you to try to understand, because I have different views. I have different, because I only come in when I'm called to do so. I'm not spending every time out there to be able to say, yes, this is what's going on. So we're looking for that insight. And so I really appreciate that, Sean.
Yeah, thank you. I would just like to point out something like I experienced in my life that was hugely impactful. My family and I, we got to live in Japan for 3 years on a tour over there. My daughter was born there. And, you know, it's so stark, so amazing, the stark contrast, because kids as young as all of our kids that play in this courtyard that we're all bickering about how close we should be and looking at them, they all walk to school by themselves every morning. They have people posted at crosswalks to stop traffic, but they walk by themselves as a group of kids to school, to and from every morning. You go to a neighborhood park, you don't see any grown-ups. The only grown-ups are the Americans there with their babies, because we're like, ooh, somebody might call the cops on us if we're not here with our kids, you know, and nobody cares. It's weird when there's a gaggle of parents around a bunch of kids playing at the playground. And amazingly, civilization hasn't broken down there yet.
Now, I certainly appreciate that. I grew up in a different country. I had communal parenting. I had many parents that looked out for me, and there was a lot of independence. And so I recognize how that feels and is different. And we're hoping to find that medium ground, right? Allow the growth, allow the development, but also do what we're being asked to do. And I also want to make sure we provide others the opportunity to talk. Who was next on the line? Francis.
Joseph, but real quick, I do just want to add, I hear that. And also, like I said, things around radically sort of re-envisioning the policy, that's not something that I think we're able to do.
I'm not talking about re-envisioning the policy at all. I'm talking about re-envisioning how we interpret and implement the policy, because there's always the black and white, and then there's always what happens everywhere else in life. And what I'm talking about is maybe like, instead of we have more conversations, maybe more events to bring people within a courtyard together, because that's really where it happens. You know, the last few months, I will say, I've gotten to know my neighbors better than the rest of the year and a half that I've been here, and it's been pretty cool. And I would say that, you know, that's the kind of thing we need to be fostering, instead of, you know, getting pinged with letters on our doors about supervision because it looks like something from the outside. And I'm not talking about rewriting or re-envisioning or reimagining policy. I'm just saying that there's times where policy is there as a tool to be able to prosecute when something happens. And then there's times where, you know, let's just let this go and interact and live our lives. And that's all.
And all I just want to clarify is that for me, this policy is, I'm not coming to you tonight to say my hands are tied and this is why I do this. I'm telling you, this is a policy that I do believe in, because I have seen what has happened in this neighborhood when that— I
promise you, no one would be more distraught if something happened to my child than me.
And I just want to pause and also say that as we reference our experiences in other places, in other neighborhoods, we also have to be aware of the fact that none of us have been through a pandemic before, and that does add another layer. But I respect what you're saying, Sean. I want to continue talking with you, even when it's a difficult conversation. Y'all can talk to Sylvina, Anna, Michael Griffel, anyone within housing with these concerns. I don't feel like you're throwing me under the bus if you bring this elsewhere, but it needs to be more of a conversation, and it can't just be, this is the policy, but it's not real life, because the policy is also real life.
Thank you. Can we go to Joseph right now and then make sure we get Menu up?
Joseph, you might be on mute. Okay, Menuab it is.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation, and this is something we have to do very often. I would like to start with the point that Asha has been mentioning. I have been working with children for many years as well. Whatever we are discussing is about the best interest of the children. So for me, if one of my neighbors, Sean or Asha, is out there when my kids are playing, I'm fine. I'm very fine. So I don't have to be next to my child. If I am there, I'm sure they will be fine too. They have to do their work. So this is a community, and we have to remain as a community. And when I see kids playing, including my children out there, I know it's safe, because I know somebody's watching from their home, or I'm next to them. So I don't. When I started my conversation, I asked you the rate of incidences that you have been facing, because for me, as I have worked for many years, and if is it really alarming to talk about these incidents and the policies, you know? So I just don't know what's happening. But for me, I would like to say two things. It's not a conflict, Francis. I mean, you mentioned about conflict of policies and, you know, us being, there's no side. I think you are really working hard for our children, because I have seen so many things ever since I came. So I think we're on the same page. What I would like to say is, like, we need to trust each other. And it's not about the policies, but it's about being human and parents. So the policies are there to guide us, not to, you know, control us. So I see a very productive, very good community here, and I would like to see it growing that way or developing in such a way. So for me, it's not a conflict. It's more to do with how we can really help our children in a time like this. We have never gone through, like Asha has been mentioning this clearly. This is a time children are really suffering the most. And as parents, the only way to do it is to come together and not to say this is how the policy is going to be. And I know this is your job, and it's also our job to learn about the policies better than you, because it is the best interest of our children. Policies are there for us. So I would say it's not conflict, it is working together. And there was a earlier comments from like children shouting and playing and being disturbed. We've gone through it. Francis, you know this better. But I would say I would rather be disturbed, honestly, and watch children having a good time. Is it not a family place? Is it not a children place? I'm not saying others should not have time, but let's not talk about children shouting and having fun as a problem. Honestly, for me, that is a problem by itself. But as you are managing this home, you need to find a place for people who, you know, there are many rooms locked and free. I know coronavirus and all, maybe we can find a way around it to help others who need a quiet place. And you have plenty of resources, I would say. So for me, I would like to see working together and giving children more space. And you should really trust all the families, because we work together. And I believe my children are very safe here. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
And I really appreciate that, Maniwab. And I conflict is the wrong word to use. You're absolutely correct. We may sometimes disagree on points of view, but I do not feel in conflict with any of you. I love this work and I love working with all of you, and I'm confident we can find solutions. Just real quick to touch on your point, if Asha is out there with your kids, 100%, I'm good. I do not want 8 parents out there with 8 children, because you can't socially distance then either. One parent with those kids, fine by me, and I believe that is fine with the policy. Just to clarify that. Asha.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Are you aware of anything like, is there any child-adult ratio? Because we might come up with something within our block that, you know, we come together as parents and say, hey, can you watch and, you know, have better understanding? I mean, we are doing that on informal basis, but now because we understand, you know, how important it is. So something like, you know, we can make some arrangement among ourselves, because as I'm saying, it is temporary. It is temporary in terms of weather conditions and all of that, not in terms of pandemic. But yes, December, November, you won't see children out so often. So that's my one question. And number 2, I was saying that when it comes to children, like as far as I understand about their development, and not, I mean, in your policy, in the guidelines, it's not covered anywhere, but I am pretty much aware of similar policy in UK where it says that children above 7 years of age, they have different cognitive ability to assess risk factors. So one child can be more mature than even a 10-year-old. So as a parent, you know your child, how well your child is assessing the risk. Like I know my child would never cross the road without me, or he would not go towards this side of my apartment where there are, you know, it's a main road, Patterson Street. He would not go there. But different children, they perceive risk factors in different way. They have their own cognitive level. And as a parents, we know our children. 5-year-old can be more mature than 7-year-old at times. So kind of that level of trust in us as parents, we would like to have that.
Also, sorry, also our kids police themselves too. They watch out for one another. You know, the older kids, that's what I see on a daily basis. You know, you really only have to really wrangle a few of them, and they kind of help keep the rest of them in line. You know, like, and they all understand they don't leave the courtyard, et cetera, just like Asha said.
I think that's very helpful to understand the different ages and kind of sort of your informal arrangements that you may have. And that's something that we'd like to learn a little bit more so that we can help understand. But one of the challenges, though, is that I don't have the ability to say that your 7-year-old is mature because I do not know them on a personal level. Similarly, with a 5-year-old, you know, I'd like to think my 13-year-old is quite smart, but boy, there's on occasion a day when somebody will look at her and go, what just happened there? And so I don't have that ability to do those judgments. But if we understand that as a community, kind of a community neighborhood watch concept, you all have these informal expectations about how each of you are providing support and assistance or providing that community engagement. Love to be able to understand that support and respect, because that helps us when we engage, right? But that's why we kind of stick with the age of the child, right? Because again, we just don't have that ability to assess the level of maturity and ability to do that. Children are the best enforcers. We ourselves are the best enforcers with our peers. And so we understand that there's so much there and it's part of the learning. So that is extremely, extremely helpful. Matt, I'm not sure if you would like to expand on that comment, but I also know that there were some babysitting conversations going on there. You know, we would love to be able to have these opportunities where we can share resources within the community, right? You know, I think about kids watching kids, right? How much growth and development there is there, a certain level of responsibility. So we want to understand how to get past COVID, of course, and continue these engagements where we can create opportunities where you get to know your neighbors in a way that then allows for these kinds of settings. But I wanted to recognize Asha's statement on that is, and also share kind of our challenge with not being able to determine the level of maturity. And that's why we must engage with the baseline, but that baseline does not feel good all the time.
I want to acknowledge that it is 7, but I don't want to cut off conversation, so we can keep this going. But if folks do need to drop out because you only planned for the hour, please feel free, and this will be sent out as a recording. One thing that I think would be important for us to touch on before we end the meeting tonight is, as we're talking about specific issues around COVID-19 and child supervision. So I've definitely been seeing a lot more mask compliance over the last week. How are folks navigating those conversations with children, particularly when they're not able to be outside physically with their kids? Because there are still kids who are over the age of 5 who are not wearing masks and are not socially distancing. So is there either input folks have on that, or how are folks navigating that? What can we share with one another as parents in the face of the fact that we are being asked to do this thing to help keep one another safe?
I'm all ears about suggestions of games kids would like to play 6 feet away from one another and maintain that the entire time. Please. I want to hear some.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It is a tall order. But this is something that we know is a source of transmission, and that's why these policies have been in place, not by us, but by the state, in order to help decrease. So, you know, truly, this is an ask, and I'm wondering how people are enforcing, or what are we to infer there, that like there isn't enforcement, or because it is very important.
And Sean, we can check in with our resources and our community partners as to suggestions around how to keep children engaged, how to in this changing space, because we need ideas.
Well, we'll certainly do our best down here on the parent ground level. But, you know, I guess the choice is either we're out there, each of us, like with our kid, making sure, because it's going to take every parent, like 1-to-1 ratio to make sure, hey, 6 feet across, let's get the yardstick out. or we bring them inside where we're all in closer contact outside of the sunlight and fresh air. You know, I don't know. We'll
It's
do our
hard.
best. That's all I can say.
Yep. And then that's what we ask, is that, you know, for us to do what we can to continue to enforce. And I understand that this policy could change tomorrow. That's how this is ever evolving. And so truly appreciate any thoughts, suggestions. We're looking for how to make mask kind of a fun thing, which it is not a fun thing. I have this, it's not a fun thing. It's part of the thing. And so we want ideas, and we recognize it as extremely challenging. And some children are just not able to wear them. And we get that. It's
Or
hard.
will refuse to, you know, because they reach a point where they can walk and they can open things and they can say no, and their will runs contrary to yours sometimes. And they're like a little human being that has its own agenda. And, you know, that's a whole different thing. And, you know, even when my daughter was a baby, she would just scream bloody murder, hated the car seat, you know, as a 6-month-old, 9-month-old, all the way up to almost 2 years old. And, you know, to fight with her in the summertime to please put your mask on. I know, yes, please. It's not art, not mommy and daddy's rule either. You know, it's a tall ask, right? So I don't know. Parents will do our best. We'll put our Voltron rings together and unite and figure out a way to comply with policy to the best of our ability within the constraints of the day.
But we
Thank you.
put our kids in the car seat. And I believe that right now is how the state is looking at this. This is not something where they're.
I get it totally. Yeah.
Louis, to your question, it's when it's the same as for adults. If 6 feet of space cannot be maintained, then that is when they need the mask. So if your kid is walking with you and you're going over to Sundance and y'all are keeping that distance, the state has no input on that. But when it comes to inability to keep the 6 feet of space, which we know is what is helping reduce some of that transition, that's when they're asking for the masks.
Okay, so sorry. So if let's say my kids are just playing outside, and I'm with them, of course, and they're playing outside, but like amongst themselves, they don't need to wear masks. Only if another kid joins in. Is that it?
Yes, I believe, I don't know what they call them, family pods. Yeah.
The family group. So if it's part of your family group or extended family group that you have been around, then there are some dispensations, which sometimes it's really hard to navigate through that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was what I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah. I just have one quick. Sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
On that family pod question, so our kids have been playing together through the whole thing in the courtyard of our children, and I know that for school groups, they're allowing, you know, about 10 kids to be together. In that respect, I kind of see the children in this community as our extended family pod. So in that respect, if we have like a tight cohort of children that have been playing together for the last 6 months, you know, or a year, or however long we've all lived here on a regular basis and not playing with other kids outside of this, would that work as a family pod then?
So let me explore that with the childcare folks on campus to see how they're navigating through that. Because, you know, I'd like to say yes, but then there's also the extension, right? Those kids are not living with those students. They are engaging with you as adults who then are engaging with others. And so I just want to make sure that I understand, but that's a very good point, Marianne.
Yeah, because we all share the same yard, and we have been through the entire thing before they had to wear masks. And, you know, we don't really bring people from outside of the community into our area.
And that's something that if we get good guidance, then we can expand it to the rest of the community and talk about that pod concept. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank
you.
We can definitely look at that. I would say in the absence of a firm answer on that, we would just have to kind of point to what are the state guidelines, which are that no gatherings of no more than 10. If you can't maintain 6 feet of space, you have to wear the mask. I would love for us to be able to make that accommodation, Marianne. though I would just like caution one another. Yes, we all know one another. Yes, we feel pretty confident that we know where folks are at and where they've been. But unless you are physically occupying the same residence and you know the whereabouts of your family members, you can't necessarily make the same guarantees that you can make with an immediate family pod. But we will look into that and see if there's any kind of, we want to make this easier. We don't want to make this harder. And certainly there's an argument for the kids are out there doing it, you know, and like, again, I don't want to throw policy out the window, but we can look at that.
Thank you. Sean, you had one other question.
Yeah, more of a comment. So like, you know, we kept all this talk about security and safety around here and how we should be doing things as parents and all that. But I think there's some other angles we can kind of tackle this from, because a big problem that we have with people coming in and out are items of opportunity that people want to take from the facilities. One of that being dumpster diving, huge attraction. I've told a few people already this week that it's residents only. And if they're looking for trash, could you please look out for the people stealing our shit, because there's plenty of them running around too. One of them got a little belligerent with us last night. It seems like a really easy, quick solution to that would be simply to put a gate on all the trashers and have the CAs go around at night at like 10 o'clock, lock them all up so people can't get in there. Because every morning the maintenance guy also has to come pick up trash from the ground that people have thrown out. You know, it's disgusting, it's disturbing, it brings crime into our community, and it brings people through that could be, you know, like, let's maybe disincentivize some of this, and also putting some cages around our bike, bike parking down there, because those things are just getting stripped. I've had a bike stolen. We've had stuff stolen. People get stuff stolen off their, you know, back porches and stuff too. But like, just kind of closing off some of those opportunities for people to come through looking for bikes, looking for things to steal, looking for trash to dig through every single night would maybe after a while start to dissipate once the word gets out, like, ah, shit, you know, FHUA, their dumpsters have gates around them. They lock them up at night, can't get in. You know, some simple things we could do, because there was a guy just last night right around our kids playing, myself and Joseph actually went to talk to the person and tell him, hey, kids are here, you can't be around here. And we called the cops after he got a little bit belligerent. So these are just some issues that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis too. And there's some like facilities changes that we could make too that would perhaps cut down on some of these problems that we're having. That'd be pretty simple and quick.
I appreciate those. I think those are really good ideas.
Thank you. And also do let us know when that's happening so that we can also keep track, because we do communicate with UOPD, share out, these plans, right? And it's really helpful to be able to say, this is what our community has done, but we need you to be here as well and do rounds and also be able to inform so that our staff too can be on the lookout for some of those things.
Right. I'm not sure how many people call, you know, when they see something, or how close y'all's working relationship is with UOPD. But, you know, we also have that like that clothing donation bin right outside the office. And I've seen people go into that, digging through it at night too. And I'm not sure if that's how that's supposed to work or not, but it just seems like another vector, because, you know, people come through here, they ride off with bikes, they take stuff off the back porches and stuff.
Folks, I apologize. One of the other facets of my role is I represent East Campus Housing at the Fairmont Neighborhood Board, and their meeting is now beginning, and I'm secretary, so I got to go to that. But I'm going to leave this recording. Silvina is a co-host, so if the conversation continues, she can continue to host. And the recording will keep going on this laptop so that other residents do have access to this. But I just want to say, I appreciate this conversation. I hope we can continue these conversations. You know, I'm always happy to make time in my office or over the phone. So thank you all.
Yeah, and Sean, some of that information about if you see folks in areas of dumpsters and things like that, we have some cameras positioned to some of these common use spaces. And so it's helpful for us to kind of get a sense of what's happening so that we can also share those communications out. We have a good relationship with UOPD.
Yeah, we have 3 cameras close by to our unit, the brown doors, and a few months in March, my truck was vandalized, and all 3 of those cameras failed to see anything. So I don't really, you know, there's one above the laundry room that's pointed off in a direction where it can't even make out anything but blobs of people walking in the courtyard across the way. I don't know where the other one's pointing. One's pointed at the front door, but like, you know.
That's something, and it's not perfect. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Denying access to these hot spots would keep everyone safe, including the kids.
Sure. Now, your idea about the bins, you're saying closing those?
Yes, putting a gate. The CAs are out, you know, I mean, go around at 9 p.m. earlier or whatever, you know, between 8 and 10 p.m., lock all the dumpsters. You know, if you need to throw your stuff away as a resident, you can throw it away during the day or right when you get off school. You can make time before 8 p.m. to throw your stuff away, but they should really be locked up so people can't just go in there, pull trash out of the dumpster that the maintenance people have to clean up the next day, dig through our bottles while our kids are around and they get belligerent with us when we tell them to leave. It's just not a good situation.
Sure. That's a great idea to re-explore. We tried that many years ago, and there was a pushback from the community about sort of, what if I don't have my key? What if I don't have this for after hours?
Yeah, the gate's open during the day and it closes at night, you know.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Joseph, I'm not sure if you wanted to add something. I saw your comment there, but I'm happy to continue to have a conversation. I know that when Francis sends this out, I can also make sure our emails are noted there for engaging. Just, you know, oftentimes we have more ideas after we leave a conversation or when you engage with some of your community members or even with at home or asking your kids, what is that experience like? How can it be better? Would love to be able to make it better. And I don't know how without your help. Was that a silence bummer or what? And mic dropped. Sorry. I've had too much caffeine today, but again, I'm happy. I just want to make sure that, you know, kids are having a good time. There are future humans, right? And I recognize that there are families of 2 without children. They are no less valued in this community. And so how do we get to that space so that you can go out and do great things?
Sorry, my mouth is dry and I'm out of tea. I've been talking too much. Are you asking us like for more suggestions on how we can make it? Or are you trying?
I want you to continue with the suggestions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I also want you to be able to understand that sometimes a suggestion is great. Whether we can deliver it in the way that you see it representing, the way you described it, it may look totally different. But I think the conversation, right? This whole idea of bins, this whole idea about, you know, I believe it was Asha and Manuel about the community watch. And, you know, you mentioned about how you know your children and their level of maturity. Help us understand how we can better see and as we're making these judgments, right? We also want to be able to provide you with how we enforce our policies without my private number. But all of those things. So happy to explore that. Asha?
You know, when I moved here in Spencerview, there were not that many children around where I live in the brown doors, but somehow, and when I have gone around Spencerview, I have not seen that many children playing in all the other blocks here. Somehow this is one area where, and I'm noticing that sometimes children come from other blocks to play here because it is
properly
so
socially distanced, of course, Selvina.
I mean, it's in the last 2 years, I have seen families coming with, you know, young children here. And it's very nice that all of these children have formed friendship. And I completely understand that we want to keep them safe and engaging at the same time. What I would take back from this meeting is probably within my reach is there, that I need to reach out and communicate more with my neighbors, and we can among ourselves, we can discuss. I think we have very good bonding here within these 4 or 5 families. We all know each other very well now, and our children are great friends. So we can have some communication and we can come up with, you know, something. We can kind of brainstorm and say, here are 4 or 5 suggestions collectively, maybe, you know, individually saying something. I don't know. I mean, I have only one brain, but together, if we think something, we might come up with something more creative. So that we can maybe think of doing next is taking this discussion at our level within brown doors, at least I can say.
All part of the brown doors?
No, I see a few faces here.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, like 2-3 people here, definitely. And I know some more people. I don't know if they are here now. I don't see them here, but there are, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Just to add on that, you said you want us to help you understand it. I think what I need to clarify is, you're a parent. You said you have kids.
I
So
do.
I think so. One, good. That's the start. So, like, what I want to say is, there is nothing to help you. Honestly, we are responsible.
Okay.
That's the way I look at it. And all this is supportive. I mean, you're supporting us. You're facilitating things for us. So I trust every family here, because being a parent is to take responsibility. I think everyone is responsible here. And for me, the only way you should look at it is that you should trust us, and you should look into our judgments, not in a different way, but coming from a parent who's like the primary caregiver, and the rules, all you want to implement should be flexible in a way that doesn't really make you uncomfortable. You were mentioning about masks with children. It's really difficult, honestly. I was just trying to come up with an idea. There's no way you can do it, honestly. And social distancing with kids, I mean, why would I send my children to play if there is that distance? Because it just doesn't make sense. So I'm sorry to say this, I'm just talking bluntly, because I'm a parent and I care about my kids, and this is the place where I can say bluntly that if we send our children, we know it is safe. I know every children here around my neighborhood, and they're really, really well disciplined. Like Asha was mentioning, I haven't seen them crossing even the road. And when they play around, they watch over each other, and one try to tell the other if there is going to be some, something they shouldn't be doing. So as a community, if you want to help, just maintain that and support in a way that we can go on what we are doing.
Sure.
Mask, yes. I wish there are fancy masks that could appeal children out there. Provide it if you could, with different animal colors or whatever. And then maybe they might. But I tried it honestly with my boys.
Yeah, and
suffocating for them to wear it and play. Boys with a lot of energy around. It's summer, so you understand it.
Absolutely. And we were exploring masks for the children to create some kind of a game, a level of interest. We have seen research, and our peers are saying if they are part of it, if they are creating it, they are more apt to accept it and to engage. And we bought some, and then we learned that they were the wrong kind recently. So we were told it was the thing to do, and then it's like, no, they're no longer the kind that we need to do. So we're kind of back to ground zero. So if you come across any ideas, please let us know. But I do want to acknowledge the level of trust. There's a level of trust. We trust that you are able and that you are part of this. But if I'm told that I need to make sure that I'm enforcing this policy, how do I engage in that trust, but still be able to say, yes, this is what's happening? And if I'm asking our community assistants to be able to follow up, right? I want to engage in that trust. And how do we cross those? And I know it's a policy and the trust. And how can we make sure that one does not impact the other and it doesn't feel like we don't want to trust you?
Can I just say one thing?
Please.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Well, I think the way it should be is like, instead of, printing a paper and posting it on each paper doors, you just bring the issue to us and then give us some room to discuss with it and come up with an idea. I think that's the start. That's the start where you say, I trust you. So I see this.
How would, for example, your neighborhood want those notifications?
For me, I would say, instead of printing it, just like have a conversation like this, or send a text or a group, something which doesn't involve a formal way of printing something and like bringing it to our door. And that's really, I was surprised when I saw that. I know it's something you have to do, But if you are asking how we can engage as a community, that should come.
That makes sense. And I know that when we consulted with our campus partners, trying to generate ideas about how to engage with families in this setting, emails get lost. Door to door right now with COVID-19 or anything like that is also not something that some of our staff is comfortable. And so we were told, provide notification, but then also do the visual, because you are so busy that you may not have had a chance to check your information, that visual. But a notice on a door is an awful thing. And I recognize that. So helping us trying to figure out is if we connect with one of you, do we get a sense that then you will reach out to the rest of the community, or do we have to go door to door and engage in that process? So suggestions like this would be extremely helpful, but we recognize that any type of notice sucks. Are there any kids? Sorry, my mother would remind me of my place and my language. But it is not appropriate, right? It doesn't feel good. It's like a ticket on your car. And so I recognize that it has a very different impact. So I do appreciate that, Manuel. And I believe Asha and then Sean, and I'm sorry if I missed.
Right. Can I just one thing? I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I was thinking what Francis was discussing about a child they found around the dumpsters, and they couldn't. And he was saying about the child, if they don't know this child, they have to call a police. And as a community member, I would say, if you have a hotline or say, do you know this child? And it would make great sense to say, of course, he's part of my community. I know him. Somebody would respond. So rather than going into the authorities and involving, which is a different way of doing it, as a community, like you could just say, do you know this kid, or, describe him if you don't post or something. And in a way that would open another way of, say, communicating. If do you have a hotline or a way to communicate information fast? And then that's something for you to consider.
Yeah, and we do check with those that are nearby just to figure out if they know of the child and they can point us in the right direction. But unfortunately, and again, policy person, I cannot hold a child while I go through the hotline. I have to seek support, but we do check out with anybody that is outside to try to figure out if they know the child.
Because I'm really totally against involving other third party when it comes to children, because those families, I'm sure they must have been worried.
Yes.
This happened. And as a community, this could happen. And there should be another way to solve it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if I might point, if we have an adult somewhere nearby, then we know we are in a good place. I'm so sorry. Sean?
Sorry, I think I let my question slip. If it comes back to me, I'll
it was on purpose. We just tried to keep it going so that you would forget. Asha?
Yeah, I was thinking, in this whole scenario of pandemic, so many policies, health related, education related, they have failed. We can't even think about what are rights and all of those things. So many rules have been bent. When we are discussing, before I even mentioned that, I wanted to say that here I'm sitting and I'm thinking from professional and as well as from a parent point of view. And when I think about professional, what Manuab said, and I completely understand your perspective. Like when I was trained in child protection, I was taught that when it comes to children, think of unthinkable and believe in unbelievable. That's how human mind works. The person who looks most trustworthy can be the greatest risk or threat to the child's safety. And that's how child protection works. That's how laws are formed. And I totally appreciate and get that, why they are formed. So that is one thing from professional point of view. I totally get that. From parents' point of view, what I also get that in this pandemic, we have to have this greater view of the whole problem. The reason is, instead of like having our children playing outside in free environment, compare the risk with that, compare the risk inside the house. If I'm burnt out and if I'm stressed out, my child is at much more greater risk. I'm a single parent here. I might shout at him every day without using my logical brain that what language am I using when I'm communicating with him? And that damage is much more severe, trust me, with children when it comes from tired, burnt out parent. So all I'm saying is, somewhere when you have official discussion, this is not usual situation. This situation, the whole globe, like globally, we are into it. Nothing is hidden anymore. So somewhere, finding that balance, it's a thin line here. And like Sean said about how we are interpreting that policy, but within light of coronavirus, we need to think and have bigger picture of this. Sometimes it might not be completely like black and white policy we would be following. We are going to slip, that we all know. And we are slipping inside our houses in these four walls also. So I see when we are balancing or we are comparing the risk factor when my child is out and playing with another kid, whether I'm supervising or not, but as long as he's in, I can see him, I can hear him if they are fighting or something, all of that. I see that if I'm not letting him do all of that, and if I'm not able to do what I'm supposed to deliver as an adult, I would see that I may get burned out at some point, and I would lose my logical brain. And I'm seeing kind of parent stress I'm measuring currently, and it's way high. It's way high in the current situation. And I'm talking about parents who have resources. There is a balance between risk and resources here. And we are only facing with risk, no resources currently. So all the support system has fallen apart currently. No schools, no childcare, nothing. So kind of we need to have this bigger picture and think where can we, little bit, can we be flexible somewhere? Can we interpret it differently? So I totally understand the policy part and keeping our children safe. But like I said, we have failed in many ways. These policies and laws, schools haven't done what they are supposed to do. Nobody is suing them. Health has failed in many ways, not able to provide any health services. Yes, great, Abby.
Those are really great points. And you know what? And it's going to get much more difficult, right? We're all going into the fall term. Some of you may be going back to school yourselves, right? And so now you're balancing 2 online education experiences. And if you have more than one person, it's really hard. And so, yeah, we need to think outside of the box. We need to think about how to stretch some of these experiences. We need to think about how to support those. And so looking for ways to do that. And that's something that we want to engage, but.
No, I was going to say, I think, this, you mentioned briefly, some of you may be going back to school in the fall, and the kind of sad news is some parents I talk to are really concerned whether or not they will be able to continue school in the fall, given the extra demands that are going to be on them. It's kind of the debate parents have about, well, can I work and teach my kid? A lot of parents are having that same discussion about whether or not they can continue their education and educate their kid, which is now what's expected of them. And I think culture is a continuous conversation, and these laws and these policies and all that inform the culture, and the world has dramatically changed. When those policies were etched in bureaucratic stone many moons ago by whoever, they were living under different circumstances, having experienced different things in a different time. And I think that's where, again, to circle back to this kind of core issue is policy, the doctrine, the dogma versus where that meets real life. And are we setting up our bureaucracies to be anti-social, anti-human flourishing, anti-parent, anti-student, or are we setting them up to facilitate our journey here through the University of Oregon? Because if people start dropping off because they can't continue school, that's not going to be good for the university's purse either. So it's an issue that ties into so many other bigger things as well.
And that's something that I'm actually exploring. So I oversee for both the residence halls and family housing the contract requirement that states you must be a full-time student. And so I'm the person who monitors that and who follows up, who works with other campus partners. So I want to look at, along with the university, what are the extenuating circumstances whereby we can tell families, if you need to go part-time, whatever that looks like, that it does not impact your ability to remain living in university-owned housing. So I do want to explore that because we recognize that that is going to become a factor. That is huge. But I also need to explore what does that mean for you all financially. So if your financial aid is tied to the number of units that you are registered, and you can only get that much, I also need to make sure I understand that so that then I can communicate with you all and share, this is how this policy, or this is how you're not being registered for units. Thank you, Manuel. Will impact. So I do want to look at the unit requirement for full-time. And so for full-time, it's 12 units for an undergraduate. And for a graduate student, it is 9 units, right? And so we want to make sure that we do that, because we understand that the university is providing or wants us to engage with our staff who are struggling with online education for their children as part of the 4J, right? And so they want us to be able to explore what are some of the concessions or some of the things that we can do. And so I want to make sure we do that for you all as students to explore. If you have to go under the unit requirement, that still does not impact your ability to remain on campus. For our family housing and university apartments, our students have the ability to have a term off. A term off means that if you have not graduated, you can request to not be enrolled in classes that term. And so I want to make sure that we share that with students once I've identified all the pieces, but I don't have all the pieces yet.
Thanks. It's been a very informative and productive discussion, I think, for a lot of us that are still here. I got to go. But I wanted to open up a question too about like, would it be possible to use, or maybe this I don't know if somebody already brought this up. It's like almost 2 hours in now, about using vacant units as potentially, teaching, tutoring, childcare, or flexible use spaces, because it seems like there's a few vacant units in many of the courtyards, at least, that could potentially be used. If that would probably, we already have that facility here, it'd be cheaper than putting a pod in the courtyard for the kids in the fall or something like that, if we have enough.
So the units
space
are being offered, even though you don't see someone moving in there. All of our units have an offer out, and if they don't have an offer,
Okay.
because we have to make repairs. What we are exploring is what other spaces do we have that we can share out, whether it's to a student that needs a quiet place to study, and we can still maintain all the university guidelines and expectations, or as Francis mentioned, the university is exploring how to engage and create spaces for child learning, the pods, and all of those things.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I gotta get out of here, but thank you very much, Silvina, for
I'll be in
facilitating the discussion.
Yeah,
and all of you that showed up.
No, thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Joseph, the party idea, great idea. COVID, can't do it. Matt, you were a quiet attendee. Are we good?
You're all good.
Okay. Okay. You said you have a 17-year-old?
Yeah.
How is it a she, her, they?
Yeah. I'm a single parent. I have full custody, and
Okay.
so there's been a lot of times where early on, while raising him, that he's had to learn how to do stuff on his own. And so
Oh my gosh.
early
Yeah.
age, he's doing laundry early age, cooking early age, so he's good at self-managing.
Oh my goodness. He's going to make someone very happy, whomever that may be.
Yeah.
Laundry is huge.
Yeah.
That's good. And you're doing all right this summer?
Yep, just moved in.
Well, welcome to the community, and I hope that you all find this a good space, and I wish it was a different time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're hanging in there.
Joseph, anything to add to the discussion? I know I saw you on the chat, and I'd be happy to check in with you too as well. But I know your idea about the social gathering for students at the end of the summer, that would be ideal. We typically have a barbecue in most summers for the community at the start of the year. But unfortunately, that's just something I don't think we can do at this time. Safe place for studying. Yes, that is something that we hope to identify, especially for families that need a kind of a quiet space. We know we've had some students who've had to work on thesis and other things, and they just need that one place of respite, right? And so trying to figure out what the university has to offer too, but we're all trying to figure out if all the courses will be online this coming fall, right? There's still, the word on the street is we still don't know. And so we know that a lot more will be needed. I'm gonna need some help deciphering that last statement, Joseph. TY, what does that mean?
Thank you.
Oh. Okay, hi, I need my kids' help in translating shorthand. That is so bad. I am so sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. All right, PK, anything we can do for you? I do thank you all for your time. Again, we'll send out our information, our emails, and continue the conversation because I think this is ongoing between ourselves and then with other community members. So I truly appreciate that.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. PK, that's only the acronyms I can see. So thank you so much. I appreciate you all. Take care.